People always knew where you were from. The Bronx. That's where I'm from. And I say it just like that because it's a pride statement. And that doesn't mean just basketball. We probably got more park space than anybody else in New York City. And I know that because I'm a Bronx guy.
Tiny's just one of the countless Bronx guys who've succeeded in the NBA.
We talk about tons and tons of guys. Rod Strickland, Ed Pinckney, they're all from here.
Even today, the borough is well represented.
Kemba Walker from the Bronx.
For me to be, a part of those names is very special.
There's one Bronx high school that's been the proving ground for so many.
DeWitt Clinton High School, and to me, this is where it all started.
DeWitt Clinton graduates include such luminaries as designer Ralph Lauren and writer James Baldwin, and nearly 20 alums have made their mark in the NBA in one way or the other.
Johnny Most went to DeWitt Clinton High School, and I didn't know that, and I asked him when I became a Boston Celtic, and he said, yeah, I went to DeWitt Clinton High School, Nate. And I'm saying, yeah, that's Johnny. We just have a rich tradition, and it started way back in the 30s and the 40s. This should be Dolph right here.
He's talking about Dolph Schayes, one of the league's earliest stars and also one of the 2 players from DeWitt Clinton High School to be named among the 50 greatest players in NBA history. The other, the man known during his early days in the Bronx as Nate the Skate.
Unheralded, Archibald has burst upon the NBA scene as the newest of the fabulous little men.
Tiny Archibald became the only player in NBA history to lead the league in assists and points in one season.
When you think of a New York City basketball player, I think of Tiny Archibald.
People look at the so-called finished product. And I was fortunate and lucky that I came here first. I'm over here, the littlest, skinniest guy over here.
Guys, I don't think he needs any introduction. All right, this is Nate Tiny Archibald, top 50 player of all time, NBA Hall of Famer. Played right here.
This is where I got my start. I'm telling y'all guys, this is where I got my start. I was glad to be a member of this team. They said, no, you was a star. Let me say this again. I was glad to be a member of this team because you know what? This was a tradition of winning. So wear the uniform proudly. People who always talk about, well, they play better ball over here and they play better ball here. But when we were in the Bronx, they nobody beat us.
Welcome to Gersh Park.
Easy York, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn is
hard, determination. It's tough, fire.
This is where we born, this is where we raised, this is where we bleed. Brooklyn, toughness, that's it.
Brooklyn, the best place in the world to come to.
When I was growing up in New York, you drive down the Parkway, and there was a sign there, Brooklyn, the 4th largest city in the United States.
Every day, every situation I'm put in, my instincts are from the streets of Brooklyn.
The fabric of Brooklyn is basketball. It's a really special, almost magical place.
Growing up in Brooklyn is it's about reputation. And so, guys were always looking to challenge each other.
Brooklyn, Brooklyn, yeah.
Brooklyn! Brooklyn is called the borough of churches, but it also can be known as the borough of legends because the list of players and coaches that it's produced is practically endless. From Red Auerbach to Joakim Noah, Red Holtzman to John Sally, and 2 of the all-time greats, Lenny Wilkens and Connie Hawkins.
I remember I saw a game at the Brownsville Boys Club in Brooklyn with Connie Hawkins, and that's the first time I saw in person the game played at that high a level.
The list continues. Orlando Blackman and Roger Brown, Lance Stevenson and a pair of kings, Hall of Famer Bernard and his younger brother, Albert.
You go all around the country, people know Brooklyn. I grew up in Fort Greene. Growing up in the inner city, living in the projects, basketball was a way of life. In Fort Greene, this is like the NBA court. This is where you played. We used to have chain nets. We used to hear ching, ching, ching. I was even the best player in my family. That's the scary part.
Bernard looking for 50, and he's got it. Back-to-back 50-point games for Bernard King.
Malik Bernard King. And I grew up here. I grew up right in this building here. Right there. 12th floor, that was my apartment. For me, it was a great place to grow up. I had a court here, and there was actually another court on the other side of the building. Can't ask for anything more in terms of if you love the game of basketball, you have a place to play and develop your skills. Yeah, thank you. Really excited about that.
You deserve it.
You know, for a kid from here, from Brooklyn, right here in Fort Greene, going to the Hall of Fame.
Still more great names. Lloyd Free before he conquered the world. Stephon Marbury, Sebastian Telfair, and Mark Jackson played his high school ball in Brooklyn. And how about Action Jackson's college teammate, a smooth shooter from Flatbush by the name of Chris Mullin.
A typical Brooklyn gym, no windows, no air. Whoever thought a few years later I'd be in a training camp with the Dream Team. It's a long way from Brooklyn, a long way from Zavarian High School. It all started right here.
You want to get the ball to Mullen, don't you? Wouldn't you? He dribbles, he stops, he shoots over Magic from 21, and oh, he hit about a 30-footer! Mullen, the greatest outside shooting exhibition I've seen in years, maybe ever.
Brooklyn taught me how to conduct myself as a person. It taught me the game of life. And it's not the buildings, it's not the gym, it's the people. You're good. Make them better, okay? You're the main man here. Make these guys a team.
Queens is a melting pot of ethnic backgrounds. It gave me a sense of worldliness that I didn't know I was getting because it was diverse in terms of people. Where I grew up in Queens, it was a city inside a city. When I left home for the first time, I realized that there were more people in my apartment complex than there was in my college town. We're in the epicenter of Left Rack City, right in the heart. This is now named the Kenny Smith basketball court. I lived right there in the 12th floor. And my mom used to be able to see me play right on the court. For me, Left Rack City taught you how to be a kid, but at the same time be a smart kid. We didn't have the shovels, we had the boot shovel. You take the boot and everybody get the boot and you start kicking and you'll make enough just for the half court. Believe it or not, there's another Kenny from Left Rack who also hit it big.
This is where I started, you know, playing ball at when I was like 10 years old.
Kenny Inston's the best high school guard I've ever seen anywhere. First time I saw him in the 6th grade, he was special.
And here's Anderson! Oh, you give me a break! Give me a break!
But Queens is a big place, and through the generations, players from all over the borough have made their mark on basketball history.
This Cousy coming out of Queens, he was the genius. Bob Cousy had a genius gene in him.
Queens were the guys who we always thought we were the thinking man's players. Brooklyn had a toughness about them, a grittiness. Manhattan had a suave about them. We understand the science of the game. We all got our start on the playground, but in Queens, there's also a legendary gym.
When it rained, everybody went to Lost Battalion Hall on Queens Boulevard.
It's special to me. It's the first place I ever played basketball. I got out of school at 3. I was here by 5. I do my homework for an hour and a half, and I was in this gym from 5 to 10 every night. One of my funniest stories started here. I was 10 years old, and the first time I was ever in a close game. And so my coach calls timeout, we're up 3 points, and he says, okay, we're gonna just run the clock out and sit on the ball and not let the team get it. So we throw the basketball in, I grab the ball and I take it, and I sit on it. I never heard that term before. Lost Battalion is where I learned the game, but Archbishop Malloy High School holds a special place in my heart. I even named my son Malloy Adrian Smith. It's a fitting tribute to my old school and my head coach, the late, great Jack Curran.
Kenny himself, was a very receptive student of basketball. His game was there, it just had to be polished.
I wasn't instantly great. I was a guy that you put in the oven, you looked, checked on, oh, he's getting there, he's not ready yet. And then all of a sudden, my senior year, first team All-American. You looked in the oven, it was like, yo, he's ready. Throughout my career, I never forgot those lessons learned back in Queens. And no matter where I went, running into other New Yorkers gave me a sense of home. We came from the same cloth.
Another New Yorker, right here, another New Yorker.
So when we saw each other, it was like seeing the guy you knew your whole life.
The Jazz, New York, you get the nice New Yorkers in one place, this is the place to be tonight.
I'm from a Queens state of mind. My thought process of why I do things, how I do them, a lot of it comes from this area.
Gotham, New York City. Yo, we doing it like this.
New Yorkers love their basketball, and for many players, that passion is sparked on playgrounds all over the city.
You feel that energy when you step on any court.
That sort of panache, freewheeling, bodacious, in-your-face style.
I always wanted to know, where's the best competition at? Because I wanted to see if I could compete and be better than those guys.
Go to courts all around the city, whether it was Jamaica, Queens, or Harlem.
Guys in Brooklyn played in the Bronx. Guys in the Bronx played in Manhattan.
5, 6 guys would come from one area and another area, play against each other, and the games got pretty heated.
And certain areas was like a magnet.
The spot that still attracts the most attention is the famed Rucker Park in Harlem.
Could you come here to Harlem, to the Rucker, and compete against these street legends?
Earl Manigault, Joe the Destroyer, Hammond. The story about him was he could jump so high that he can get a $1 bill off the top of the backboard and leave change.
You had people up in the trees, sitting on branches. Everywhere you looked around, there were people.
One player who used the Rucker as his personal playground was a skinny kid from Long Island named Julius Irving, who took on a new identity when he came to the city.
This is where the legend of Dr. J started.
When he dunked, the place just went ballistic. It was a revelation.
All of a sudden, Dr. J, Dr. J, Dr. J.
Here's Jackson challenging Jones, and we're tied. What a performance on the New York City product.
New York City's produced so many great point guards.
Pearl Washington, Rod Strickland, Kenny Smith. That's the history of New York, point guards. That's the base, those guys right there.
The Dick McGuires and the Bob Cousy's.
Watch Bob Cousy exhibit that tremendous skill which has made people call him Mr. Basketball.
They claimed that when you played with Bob Cousy, if you didn't have your eyes open, you'd lose teeth. Because he'd find people when they didn't even know they were open.
New York basketball players in general were very good going to the basket.
Alston banks it in again. Great drive by Marbury. Oh, what a great use of the bounce.
Very good ball handlers.
Between the legs, behind the back, crossover, just, variety, you know what I'm saying?
Here's Anderson to the hoop.
Kenny Anderson, he's an artist with the basketball.
When you think of a New York City basketball player, I think of Tiny Archibald.
Archibald on a drive at the other end, beautifully done.
Somebody slick, somebody really smooth.
That's the New York City right there.
Brooklyn had a toughness about them, a grittiness.
The wheel by Tinsley and a beauty.
Manhattan had a suave about them.
Charlie Scott, a young, exciting, do-it-all player.
Queens were the guys who we always thought we were the thinking man's player. We understand the science of the game.
It was Kenny Smith who set it up. Walker gets around one defender, tries on another and gets the score.
There it is, New York City.
We've had a lot of great point guards to come out of New York, and for me to be a part of those names is very special, and I definitely take a lot of pride in that.
He is the hardwood equivalent of the Freedom Tower, which is considered the tallest building in North America. You can make an argument he's the greatest player ever played. That's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who grew up as Ferdinand Louis Alcindor.
I was raised in Manhattan, so I learned the game right in the heart of the city. We're at St. Nicholas Park, which is on St. Nicholas Avenue. When I was 6 or 7 years old, my dad took me to a Duke Ellington concert right up here on this hill. So this is the northern edge of Harlem, and a place where I spent a lot of time when I was a kid. That was our park. People that come there to play us, we wanted to beat them. I never consciously made a connection between basketball and how it is tied to life in New York City, but I grew up in it, and I was part of it.
From the heart of New York City, from the sports capital of the world, Madison Square Garden.
The experience of going to Garden was unbelievable because I got to see the game played at the highest level. I got to see Bill Russell's Boston Celtics, and at the same time, Wilt was dominating the NBA. Those were really great object lessons in how to play the game. I remember there was a really good player that played at George Washington High School, Wallace Goodwin. I was playing against him in one of these games out here in the park, and I was able to block his shot. And I was like, wow, that was fun. And it surprised him, it surprised me. I'm certain my competitiveness was honed on these courts.
In New York City, we find Lou Alcindor of Power Memorial Academy, a high school All-American.
I started to learn certain things that I needed to learn. The most important being my hook shot. The prototypical center was a big bruising guy. That wasn't me. I was tall but skinny, and quickness and agility were my strengths.
Lou Alcindor won 3 straight city championships, but he was the best high school player I've ever seen, not even close. He dominated the game at both ends of the floor, more so than any player I've ever seen in high school. And he goes to UCLA, and he's the most dominating player in the history of college basketball.
3 times the most valuable player of the NCAA, he led the Bruins to 3 national championships.
It was difficult to leave because I'd never been any other place. So New York was all that I knew.
Just a decade after watching NBA greats at the old Garden, Kareem would return to New York City, but he was hardly treated as a hometown hero.
The people of Madison Square Garden were on my case from the beginning, when I started playing with Milwaukee, just because I was someone who didn't stay here to go to school. I didn't play for the Knicks, so they gave me a rough time. I guess that's one of the ironies of the way things develop.
Kareem's signature skyhook, learned on the playgrounds of New York City, would allow him to carve out a 20-year NBA career and launch him into basketball immortality.
They go to Kareem. Kareem backs here. Hook shot. It's up. It's good. It's good. The all-time leading scorer in the history of professional basketball, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I think my New York roots kind of faded into obscurity just because playing for Milwaukee and Los Angeles. It made me seem like I wasn't from here. But I always felt like a New Yorker. I always felt that connection was always part of who I was.
What makes it unique is that it's out here on its own. It's way smaller than the other boroughs. The people who live here are mostly cops, firefighters, school teachers. It's a sports kind of town. It's a kid sort of town in many ways.
The forgotten borough.
Because it is separated geographically, you have to take a boat to get over here.
And back in '83, the kids from St. Peter's Boys High went on a legendary run. They beat Mark Jackson's Bishop Loughlin team and just kept winning until they reached the Catholic High School Championship game against my team from Queens, Archbishop Malloy.
Everywhere you went on Staten Island, it's all people want to talk about.
I could barely play because of a stress fracture in my leg, but we were still confident that St. Peter's run would end that night.
I remember early in the game, they had 2 dunks. They set the stage a little bit early and jumped out to a lead. We battled back. It wasn't flashy. We didn't have any dunks.
Once we settled in, it just seemed like we were on the same page, the 5 guys that were out there all the time, and it felt like it flowed so well.
They had some kids who were real tough guys who weren't afraid to box out and do the dirty work of basketball, and they had a young man named Greg Pedro. Greg Pedro was a guy who could get you points when you needed points.
We just had no fear, and so, you put that together with a group of guys that are working hard together, anything can happen. We didn't play scared, we played to win.
With St. Peter's leading by 2 in the final seconds, Pedro made a big defensive play to seal the win.
We lose by 2 to St. Peter's, Greg Pedro, and he's a dentist today. And so I lost to a dentist.
He didn't get beat by a dentist, he got beat by a united team with a good coach, and that's what's special.
Great story for Staten Island. Terrible story for Archbishop Malloy and Kenny Smith, man. That hurts more than any other loss in the NBA or college.
I never got my city title, but they won the only top-level high school boys championship in the history of Staten Island basketball.
When they gave us our trophies and we were all sitting around, I remember discussing it with Coach Rupert after the game for a couple of minutes, saying that I said it wouldn't happen again, and he said probably not.
You still see people now, they say I was at that game. People talk about where they were and what they did that night. For a long time they were celebrating that they were part of that. Staten Island, a little bit the lost borough now, kind of grew up.